Time now for this week's Health Matters. PA Lynn Szabo, Paul Critz here with you. And how you doing today, Lynn, first off?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited because I get to go do the homeless clinic after this.
So you showed up in scrubs
I'm in
today.
scrubs,
That's
yeah.
wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And just that's at 12, right up the street?
Yeah, right up the street where the old Gordy Bros used to be. It's kind of the way I think of it. But I guess it's a superette location, kind of at the intersection of Howland Hill and Elk Valley Road.
Right.
Noon to 5. So
What will you be doing there today?
Seeing patients.
What kind of patients?
Homeless mostly, I imagine.
Yeah.
I've never done it before, but Maria was on the show and she talked about it. So the physician who volunteers to do it apparently couldn't volunteer today. So they asked me if I could do it, and I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent, excellent. It is very necessary, and you're right at ground zero for it here, too, I guess. But I also wonder, with population, let me know, maybe next week we can talk about this, just what happened with you today. But whether or not it's all just, people coming out of the bushes, the homeless population all around us here, or if you also get people from the Birch Tract and other folks who might not be homeless but are taking care or taking advantage
Right.
of...
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the criteria to be seen are, but I hope it's wide open.
Yeah. The Maria did not strike me as somebody who'd be standing at the gate.
Oh, no, she's not a barrier to care kind of gal.
Right,
She's like a no rules. Let's just do it. Yeah, they just got a van. They just got the grant money came through for a van, so they're going to up their game.
Excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
super.
And that's something we should certainly revisit in a future.
Every other Sunday, noon to 5.
Here in Delnor County, here in Crescent City, on the outskirts of Crescent City, in the heart of the meth district, we call it, about 250 yards up the street from us. So about an eighth of a mile away from KFUG. And I know just from living in this neighborhood, there are a lot of people around here who could benefit from access to health care, especially
Hoping
here.
to meet at least 10 of them today.
So today's topic is not about the rest of Lynn's day and how she's going to spend her afternoon, but it is about sleep apnea. And I got this email. You sent this just about today's show, and I just hopped on really quick and Googled how many Americans suffer from sleep apnea. And I got an interesting thing. Maybe you can clarify it in today's show or not. But it said that it's estimated that about 30 million Americans suffer from sleep apnea,
Right.
but only 6 million are diagnosed with it.
Right, it's really hard to diagnose somebody.
Okay.
And we'll get into that because there is drama around sleep apnea.
All right.
now. So obstructive sleep apnea is a sleep-related breathing disorder that causes repetitive periods of apnea, which means no breathing, due to airway obstruction. Okay. So really common in people who are obese and people who have risk factors anyway for cardiovascular disease. And way more common in men, but women have more indication that if they have sleep apnea, that they have damage to their heart muscle.
Ooh, okay.
So it's a weird little connection. You would think, what? How does that work? But
Okay, I know we'll probably get into, but
Yeah.
what comes first? The sleep apnea, the heart?
probably the
muscle?
obesity or the
Okay.
risk, the underlying risk factor for cardiovascular disease, and then the actual apnea happening for a long time. Sometimes people, they're asleep, right? So they're not aware it's happening. It takes an outside person to comment on it. Like, you weren't breathing last night. And it gets people really upset. As you can imagine, it's really startling to see somebody you care about, like, struggling to breathe through the night and apparently not being aware of it at all.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's good treatment. It's continuous positive airway pressure, CPAP machine.
Okay.
And there's good evidence to suggest it saves lives. So it's a good thing to get.
Now, what's that look like? That fits over, is it just like a mouthpiece
nose
fits
and
over
mouth,
your nose?
yeah.
Yeah, like an oxygen
Right.
mask. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So like I said, people usually come in with a report with the patient saying, look, this is what I've observed while this person is asleep. And the patient's like, I don't know, people tell me I snore.
Are there any indications if you have sleep apnea, any changes in your own health or situation that can include?
There's
okay.
a lot of symptoms that go along with that.
Okay.
So what the observers are going to see is they're going to see loud snoring, gasping, periods of not breathing. But what the person's going to feel is they're going to feel unrested. They're going to feel tired. tired. So sometimes people are tired because they're emotionally spent or something, but sometimes people are tired in a sleepy kind of way, and they're cognitively not connected. So they're not driving well, they're not thinking well, they're they have a dull headache when they wake up, and they kind of walk through their day, just not really with it.
Sure, let alone that they've missed out on restorative sleep, too, and their body
Right.
hasn't been able to do the basic repairs it needs
Right.
to
And
do.
if it's not recognized correctly, I think somebody could go into a provider with those complaints and get a diagnosis of depression and get put on antidepressants when that's not at all the problem.
Really? Have you seen that
It
happen?
would be super easy to do.
Okay,
I think.
okay.
So it's not only obesity that's a problem, it's also some people just in the structure of their neck have throat narrowing. Maybe they're the formation of their jaw and stuff like that. So it's not always your classic older male who's overweight.
I have a personal story.
Okay.
Okay, so my first wife was a snorer and had sleep apnea and didn't know it. And I'd lay there next to her in bed and listen to, she'd be snoring, she'd snore, and then stop. And I'd nudge her, and she'd go, and start again.
Right.
And it's something that didn't start. And there were big changes, at least to her and her body. It was something that happened after her first pregnancy. She really wasn't a snorer before then. And then she was after being
Did she
pregnant.
gain weight?
Not a
it's
lot.
pretty common.
Not a lot, no, but I don't know if just things shifted or changed in some sort of way
Yeah,
that
that's
changed
kind of
it.
interesting.
Yeah,
That would be interesting to understand better.
Yeah, and that was terrifying to hear her just
Yes.
stop breathing.
Yeah.
So what stops you it's just constricting? Is it just it's blocking off? Is there a change? Is structure? I mean, is there a flap that closes? I mean, what?
Yeah, it's just like, well, you have to have more of a drive to breathe, and you don't really have it, and you just are kind of quietly going into that dark night, and then it causes secondary problems. So it's terrifying for the person watching. And when you come out of it, when the respiratory drive is able to overcome that obstruction, then it's a gasping.
Yeah, like
and
you're-
it kind of sounds a little horrific.
Like you're coming up for air out of in water. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And then it kind of happens again, and then et cetera, through the whole night. And a lot of people don't really believe they have it.
And it's just basically it's not a nervous system kind of thing or the signaling the going. It's not your drive to breathe or to take a breath.
Oh,
it's
all of that.
Real,
It is
okay.
all of that.
Well, then how much? So, and then also on top of that, then it's also structural.
Right.
In the whatever this part's called.
Right.
What's the difference between a larynx and a pharynx?
The larynx is a smaller part of a pharynx.
Okay, I did not know. In my mind, those have always been interchangeable, and I had no idea what that was. I figured since I
Yeah,
heard you.
the larynx is probably going a little further down into the lungs.
Okay, that's
And you could argue a pharynx is maybe more throat.
Okay,
like
okay.
GI. Anyway.
So more than just structural issues in the breathing apparatus, there are other things perhaps happening on the nervous system side.
Right.
Okay.
It's that little reptilian brain. It's like, okay, cashing it in. and then there's
Your term for not breathing to start going quietly into that dark night.
Right.
I just wanted to point out I was sitting here just covering my face after you said that because I think that's wonderful, and I appreciate the literary allusion too.
So what happens is the person has this, they usually alarm somebody that's sleeping in the same room. Usually both people come in for the exam room because the person it's happening with is not quite believing it, or, not quite like, they're just kind of a societal shame and snoring, and so they don't want to be teased and stuff like that. But the other person's alarmed for their health, and so they come in, and what happens is the provider should run the risk factors, right, and see where they are at risk for cardiovascular disease. They should look at the symptoms in a new way, maybe putting depression kind of a couple back burners away, and then they do something called a stop bang questionnaire, which is kind of learning about what they observed, the observer of the patient is learning a little bit about what the symptoms, but they also measure the neck, which is kind of interesting. If it's greater than 19 centimeters, then that's a risk factor. And so the reason they do this is because insurance companies, in order to get a sleep apnea machine or a continuous positive airway pressure machine, CPAP machine, they want you to get a sleep study. And you can't just, like, it's not like ordering a Big Mac, you can't just order one. You have to talk the insurance company into paying for it.
Right.
Okay. And sometimes what they do for preliminary is they'll just put a pulse ox on somebody's finger if they don't quite meet all the criteria. So the insurance company is blocking paying for it. And if the pulse ox shows periods of apnea, they're able to kind of go further. So this study, a sleep study, is called a polysomnography, and it's made up of 2 parts usually. Although lately I've been seeing the 2 parts on 2 different nights, and it's a weird trip because you get your jammies on, you drive down to the sleep lab, and there's people hired to watch you all night.
Yeah, right. Relax.
and they wire you up, and they put and they give you, put you in a hospital bed with a strange pillow, and they expect you to just drop off to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
And most people are super reluctant to do that, and they never have a good night's sleep.
Yeah, so what do you learn? One quick question. Where's the sleep lab?
Well, in Humboldt County, so we don't have a lot up here. So in Humboldt County, it's kind of in between the old General Hospital and St. Joe's, near where the old Planned Parenthood was.
Oh, okay, in the medical part of town.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then I think up here it's in Brookings.
We were talking before recording today about keeping these things a little more standardized so we can share them everywhere, and maybe not having Health Matters be so specifically Del Norte, but this is going to be so terribly specifically Del Norte, because we started the show with talking about what's going on up the street this afternoon. But the sleep study place used to be like in Harbor by the side of the highway. Do you remember that? And then it became a brewery, and for a while there was a watch repairer in it, and there's still, those rooms are still there. And I always thought that was so, because not only was it a sleep study place and everything that goes along with that, but you're right there next to Highway 101. And this was...
It is in no way representative of probably the typical person's night experience.
Exactly.
Not at all. And there's a little booth with people staring at you.
Yeah, do they do the one-way mirror thing, or is it...
No, it's kind of weird. Well, what they used to do is they used to do the actual study for half the night. They would get indicators that made them think the person had the diagnosis, and then they would hook them up to a CPAP machine.
Okay.
And they would demonstrate that the CPAP machine resolved the problem. Now I think they're making people come back for 2 nights. And that's kind of a bummer, because that's another barrier to care, in my opinion.
The other side of the coin is how can you get any sort of real science out of, here's half a night of interrupted sleep, and then another night, another half a night of here's with the CPAP on there.
Some people meet criteria out of the gate. Although they'll swear that they weren't asleep.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
We're asleep more than we think we are. Yeah. So, and if they get proof of treatment, then you get in line for a new non-invasive CPAP machine, and then sometimes in some people they will do surgery, like they'll remove some of the soft palate and stuff if people really aren't getting better with the non-invasive methods. So.
I'm sorry. Is it something like if it's obesity? Is it something that can be cleared up if you lose weight, if you change things, or after you cross that line?
It can be. Yeah, it kind of. There might be a complicating factor with structure of the throat and jaw and stuff. So complications of sleep apnea. This is why it's important to go through all this. Is premature death from all-cause mortality. Okay. Heart attack, which in our language is myocardial infarction, or MI, CVA, which is stroke, high blood pressure, cardiac dysarrhythmias. And so what I see most of the time is atrial fibrillation, which is a dysfunction in how the top part of the heart beats, and metabolic syndrome, which is kind of on the continuum to diabetes, so elevated blood sugars. And this I didn't think about till I put the show together, but neurocognitive dysfunction. So it's like lights on, nobody home,
Right. Yeah. You're
Right.
hazy. You're just, yeah, sure.
And so because people are in that slightly confused state, they get into more accidents, like motor vehicle accidents, because they're slightly confused. And then complications of the treatment, that's fair to address. But these are things like a runny nose, maybe some skin irritation from where the mask is, some facial pain, and swallowing air, which probably leads to burping.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's, I mean, and this is, if you've got something on your face that's blowing up your nose, that's what's going to happen right there.
I guess you could argue, what's it blowing up my nose? Is there mold spores getting blown up there? Or is there abnormal bacteria? So kind of brings me in a roundabout way to what there's actual Del Norte and probably United States drama about this. And recently, a lot of CPAP machines were found to be defective.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's not a lot of factories that make CPAP machines. In fact, I think there's 3. And one went offline because it was making machines that they thought had the capacity to blow dangerous bacteria and that the filters were problematic and things like that. So a lot of people, it seems like everybody in Del Norte County, got a letter saying, don't use your CPAP machine anymore. It's not functional. It's dangerous. So what happened after that, they were instructed, initially a lot of people were instructed to go back to their provider and get a new machine ordered. But also I heard from patients that there's actually an 800 number and I think an online process to get a new machine. But with 2 of the 3 factories down, that's not moving very fast.
Wow.
And so insurance companies have also stepped in and they're requesting new sleep studies. So sleep studies are really, really hard to get an insurance company to pay for. And so you have a person with this diagnosis, nothing has changed except they unfortunately got a dysfunctional machine. And so now they have to go through the whole process again to prove that they have the disease process that's already been proved. And the whole thing takes sometimes a year.
Wow.
And so when they finally get the go-ahead to get the machine again, there's a problem at the factory. There's a problem with the supply chain. So it's been super frustrating for patients. And some of them continue to use their old machine, putting them at risk for whatever it was that they felt was dangerous about it. But some people in the course of going through another whole year to get a machine are defervescing in their cardiovascular state.
Right.
So they're getting worse cardiovascular disease, feeling horrible, increasing their all-cause mortality, MIs, CVAs, all that kind of stuff.
See, I think, if given that choice, I think I would say, all right, it hasn't hurt me now,
Right.
and not using my CPAP will hurt me or could possibly hurt me too.
Right.
And I know that evil more than this thing I got in the mail. I'd probably keep using it too. So far as just thinking, no harm, no foul, and
until you get to the point where you need some new supplies, because there's a supply element.
Oh, you have to change filters and things.
And they're saying, oh no, we're no longer servicing that machine.
Yeah.
So it's just bad.
Yeah.
All the way around it, and it's super frustrating for the patients and really maddening for the providers too. So,
and as we were talking before we started recording too, indicative of a much wider issues that perhaps our entire society faces.
Right.
We don't need to revisit that. That was a real depressing conversation we had before we got going.
Yay. But one wonders what if this patient who has sleep apnea needs this machine lives in San Francisco? How many sleep study access is there? Can they just pull the machine off the shelf because
Right.
they have a stockpile of them? What's the difference here between rural healthcare and urban healthcare? Maybe it's as bad as it is here in this particular circumstance. I don't have any personal knowledge of it, but it it just seems that we're back to, is healthcare a right or is it a privilege?
Well, I don't know. It seems like with the manufacture of the CPAP, being hit and a third of its manufacturing capacity being taken offline, that's like a supply chain issue that's going to apply to everybody, regardless of where you are.
Well, but if you're UCSF, do you stockpile CPAP
do you stay
machines?
Okay, yeah, sure.
If you're Del Norte Community Health Center, you don't.
You don't, right?
Yeah.
You know that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Although they have lots of cool things, so they do have lots of cool stuff, but that's not it.
I remember the pride that you had. I think it was one of, if not the very first Health Matters that we recorded in the Redwood Urgent Care building, showing me all the stockpile of stuff that you had.
Oh.
And I was thinking, this isn't going to show on the radio, but but you were just showing me these shelves. Look at what we have.
Look, we have stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's still on the back of my van parked out in front of lovely KFUG. I have a bunch of like ankle splints and knee sleeves and stuff like that was going to be thrown away by one of the people I work with, and I said, I'll take it. And so I've been driving around in the back of my van, and the back of my van is full
Wow, man.
of orthopedic appliances that I don't really know what to do with. But I couldn't. They were going to take it to the dump. So
That seems so wasteful, so ridiculously wasteful. Wow.
yeah.
Well.
So
Well,
anyway.
maybe, I don't, and this seems like such a strange thing to say, but maybe we'll get lucky, and you'll get lucky, and somebody today will need one of those then, with what you're
I'm
doing
ready.
up the road.
I'm ready for the neoprene sleeve. Somebody with a bad knee, maybe.
Ooh.
Yeah. Is it wrong to want that?
Yeah, no, I think it's wrong to kind of enjoy the the more gory wounds and things like you do.
Yeah.
And that's not wrong.
Oh,
Always
yeah.
know.
I had a really good one yesterday in clinic, and we were able to help him.
What was good about it? Just about the wound?
That we were moving forward, and he was better.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to give me some
Yeah.
gory details. Never
Chance
mind.
to
All
cut
right.
is a chance to cure. Let's just say that.
Well, we won't keep you any longer today because I know you got to scoot up the road, and,
Yeah.
and you'll be there till when this afternoon?
Till 5.
Till 5, all afternoon, just up the road at the market here. That's at the corner of Howland Hill and Elk Valley Road for the is there a title for this? It's just the homeless
Homeless outreach. I
mobile
think.
homeless
Yeah.
outreach clinic thing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Maria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lynn Szabo, thank you so very much for this week's Health Matters. And any thoughts about next week yet?
There's stuff going on in pharmacies in
Right.
town.
Okay.
You all might have noticed. That might be interesting.
That's a
talk
whole,
about.
and it's interesting. I'd like to, and talk about just sort of the place that the farm. I know we talked about earlier with Mike Henderson, pharmacist here locally, about the role that pharmacies and pharmacists play in healthcare. I think is it exaggerated, that role in Del Norte County? In Del Norte County, do pharmacists play a more primary role?
Oh, yeah. Pharmacists have moved, actually, over the years, have actively sought a more primary role. And I think the providers in general really appreciate it, sometimes find them annoying, but almost always they're on the side of right. So
Right.
they're super helpful.
And there's always a need that needs to be, a hole that needs to be filled. And so,
Right.
yeah. Okay.
Right.
Well, I look forward to that conversation. Next week's Health Matters. Thank you, Lynn.
Uh-huh.